How to stop overthinking. Hello and welcome to my podcast, Don't Get a Therapist Yet. The podcast that helps you to understand your mind, manage difficult emotions, and learn practical psychological strategies that you can begin using right now today. I would just ask a very small favour of you. For me to improve this channel, please, can you click the subscribe button? It helps this podcast reach more people that I can help, and that's what I want to do. So, I'm Wendy Castelino. I'm an accredited CBT therapist and EMDR therapist and have worked in mental health for more than 35 years. Today, we're exploring one of the most common difficulties I hear about from clients: overthinking. Perhaps you replay conversations repeatedly, wondering whether you said the wrong thing. Maybe you spent hours imagining everything that could have gone wrong in the future. Or perhaps you analyze the decision so thoroughly that you end up feeling more confused than when you started. Don't we all do that? Overthinking often feels as though we are trying to solve something, but instead of reaching a useful conclusion, we then become trapped in a mental loop. In this episode, we will look at why overthinking, whether overthinking comes from nature, nurture, or our environment. 3 practical examples of how it appears in everyday life, and 20 strategies drawn from CBT, ACT, compassion focused therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, mindfulness, and internal family systems informed approaches. What a load of approaches! And why not? Let's go for the big one today. You do not need to use all 20 strategies, that's absolutely fine. Listen for the ones that speak to you. Perhaps choose 2 or 3 and practice those consistently. But before we begin, this podcast provides general psychological education, and it's not a substitute for an individual assessment or treatment. Seeking professional help, I'm a professional, if overthinking sincerely affects your well-being, your sleep, your relationships, or your ability to function. I mean that most sincerely. So, on to the podcast. So, part 1. What is overthinking? Well, thinking is useful. Thinking helps us plan, make decisions, learn from experience, and solve problems. But overthinking is different. Overthinking happens when the mind continues working on something without producing a helpful answer, decision, or action. So, there are 2 common forms of overthinking. The first is worry. Worry tends to focus on the future. What if I make a mistake? What if they reject me? What if something terrible happens? The second is rumination. Rumination generally focuses on the past. Why did I say that? Why did this always happen to me? What does that mistake say about me? Both worry and rumination can give us the impression that we're doing something useful. We may tell ourselves, if I think about it for long enough, I will finally feel certain. Or, if I examine every possible outcome, I can prevent anything bad from happening. If I replay the conversation, I can work out exactly what the other person thought. But the problem with that, absolute certainty is rarely available. The more we try to get the certainty, the more the questions the mind generates. So, therefore, overthinking is not simply having a lot of thoughts, it's being caught up in a repetitive thinking that increases distress while reducing effective action. So, why do we overthink? The brain is designed to notice danger. From our ancestors, being able to anticipate threats has survival value. A person who notices signs of danger and remembers previous threats may have been more likely to survive. And the problem is, our modern brain still contains this ancient threat detection system. The difficulty is that it doesn't only respond to physical dangers, it also responds to modern problems such as criticism, rejection, embarrassment, uncertainty, financial worries, relationship difficulties, work pressures, health concerns, and frightening possibilities presented through social media and the news. Your mind may therefore treat an unanswered message, a difficulty meeting, an uncertain medical appointment as a threat that must be mentally resolved. Overthinking is often the brain's attempt to protect us. It says, let me keep analysing so that you will be prepared. Unfortunately, this protective strategy can become part of the problem. The more attention we give a frightening thought, the more significant it appears. The more significant it feels, the more we think about it. So therefore, a loop develops. A thought creates anxiety. Anxiety makes the thought feel important. We analyse the thought, and the analysis produces more anxiety and more thoughts. So, is overthinking nature or nurture? The most accurate answer is that it's usually a combination of nature, nurture, and current circumstances. So let's take nature, for example. Some people are born with a more sensitive or cautious temperament. They may notice risk quickly, experience emotions intensely, be highly conscientious, dislike uncertainty, have a vivid imagination, or be particularly sensitive to other people's reactions. Now, these qualities are not necessarily weaknesses. Sensitivity can support empathy. Caution can prevent careless decisions. Conscientiousness can help someone become reliable and successful. However, under stress, these same qualities may contribute to excessive analysis. There may be also a genetic vulnerability to anxiety. Although genes do not determine a person's destiny, they influence susceptibility rather than creating an inevitable outcome. So let's talk about nurture. Our early experiences often influence how we respond to uncertainty and mistakes. A child may learn to overthink if mistakes were heavily criticised, approval depended on achievement, the environment was unpredictable, adults frequently worried, emotions were dismissed, conflict made the environment feel unsafe, they had to monitor other people's moods, or they experienced bullying, neglect, loss, or trauma. For example, a child growing up with an unpredictable parent may become exceptionally alert to changes in tone of voice or facial expression. As an adult, that person may analyze messages and conversations because their nervous system learnt that noticing small changes could help them stay safe. What now looks like overthinking may once have been an intelligent adaptation. Environment. Our current environment can also intensify overthinking. We are surrounded by constant news, social comparison, online advice, health information, work messages, notifications, reviews, opinions, and endless choices. 20 years ago, a person might have considered 3 options before making a purchase. Today, they can read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reviews, watch hundreds of videos, and still wonder whether they've chosen correctly. More information does not always create more confidence. Sometimes it creates more uncertainty. Overthinking is therefore rarely caused by one thing. It usually develops through an interaction between your temperament, learning, past experiences, and current stress. So let's think of 3 practical examples of overthinking. Example 1, the unanswered message. Imagine that you sent a message to a friend. Several hours pass and they have not replied. Your mind begins, have I offended them? Did my message sound rude? Maybe they no longer want to be friends. You reread the conversation repeatedly. You check whether they're online. You consider sending another message, but then worry that it will make you look needy. The only confirmed fact is that they have not replied yet. The mind has filled the gap in information with a frightening story. This is an important feature of overthinking. Uncertainty is treated as evidence of danger. Example 2, the work presentation. You have a presentation tomorrow. Preparation will be helpful, so you check your slides and practice what you want to say. But useful preparation gradually becomes overthinking. You imagine forgetting your words. You picture a colleague noticing that you're nervous. You repeatedly change minor details. You stay awake rehearsing every possible question. By the morning, you are exhausted. The overthinking was intended to improve your performance, but it deprived you of sleep and made the presentation so much harder. Example 3, the decision that never feels certain. You are considering whether to accept a new job. You write a list of advantages and disadvantages. You speak to friends. You research the organisation. These are reasonable actions. But you continue searching because you want to guarantee that you will never regret the decision. Each new opinion creates another question. What if the manager is difficult? What if I stay where I am and miss an opportunity? What if I leave and realise I was happier before? The real problem is not a lack of information. It is an unwillingness to make a decision while some uncertainty remains. No major decision comes with complete certainty. Eventually, we must decide what seems reasonable and accept that we cannot control every outcome. Part 2, 20 strategies that actually help. Now, let us consider 20 practical strategies. CBT strategies. Number 1, separate productive and unproductive thinking. Ask yourself, is this thinking leading towards a decision or action? Productive thinking is specific and practical. For example, I am concerned about tomorrow's meeting. I will prepare 3 main points and arrive 10 minutes early. Unproductive thinking is repetitive and hypothetical. What if I look foolish? What if everyone notices? What if I cannot cope? A useful question is there something practical I can do now? If the answer is yes, identify the action. If the answer is no, continue to analyse the issue is unlikely to help. Case study. Sarah has a team meeting the next morning and notices herself repeatedly imagining that she will forget what to say. She asks, is this thinking helping me to take action? She writes down 3 key points, checks the meeting time, and then closes her laptop. When the same worries return, she reminds herself that she has already completed the useful preparation. This technique helps Sarah to move from endless mental rehearsal to one clear action. Number 2, use scheduled worry time rather than trying to suppress worry completely. Give it a boundary. Choose a regular period of approximately 15 to 20 minutes, preferably not too close to bedtime. When a worry appears during the day, Write down a few words and tell yourself, I will return to this during my worried period. At the scheduled time, review your list. Some worries will no longer feel important. For the remaining worries, decide whether there is an action you can take. This technique teaches the brain that a worry does not require immediate attention. You're not ignoring the thought, you're choosing when to engage with it. Case study. David worries throughout the day that his teenage son may be struggling at school. Each time the worry appears, he writes son and school on a note and postpones it until his 6 p.m. worry time. When he reviews the note, he decides on one useful action. Ask his son, how is school going over dinner? The worry still appears, but David learns that he does not have to investigate it immediately every time. Strategy 3. Complete a thought record. Write down what happened, what went through your mind, how you felt, what evidence supports the thought, what evidence does not support the thought, and what a more balanced view might be. For example, my friend has not answered my message. The automatic thought might be, she's annoyed with me. Evidence supporting that thought might be limited. Evidence against it might include, she's often busy, she's taken several hours to respond before, there's nothing obviously offensive about my message. A more balanced thought could be, I do not know why she hasn't responded. There are several possible explanations, and I do not need to assume the worst. The objective is not forced positivity. It's a more flexible, evidence-based thinking. Case study. Priya sends an email to a manager and receives no reply by lunchtime. Her automatic thought is, I have annoyed her and made myself look incompetent. In a thought record, Priya notes that her manager often spends mornings in meetings and that the email contained a routine question. Her balanced thought becomes, I do not know yet why she has not replied. Being busy is at least as likely as being annoyed. Her anxiety reduces enough for her to return to work. Number 4. Distinguish a real problem from a hypothetical worry. A real problem exists now. For example, I have a bill that must be paid by Friday. A hypothetical worry is based on what if. For example, what if I lose my job next year and cannot pay my bills? Using problem solving for current problems. Define the problem clearly, list possible solutions, choose one and take the first step. For hypothetical worries, practice tolerating uncertainty than rather trying to solve an event that has not happened. Case study. Mark notices 2 different worries. The first is, my electricity bill is overdue, which is a real problem requiring action. He telephones the supplier and arranges a payment plan. The second is, what if energy prices rise again next year and I cannot cope? This is hypothetical, so he practices saying, that problem is not happening today. I will deal with it if it arises. Separating the two stops him trying to solve an imagined future all evening. Strategy 5. Conduct a behavioural experiment. Overthinking is often maintained by untested predictions. You may predict, if I make a small mistake, everyone will think I'm incompetent. A behavioural experiment helps you to test that belief. You might intentionally allow a minor imperfection in a low-risk situation and observe what happens. Did everyone reject you? Did anyone even notice? Could you tolerate that discomfort? Real experience is usually more powerful than endless internal debate. ACT strategies. Acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, does not require us to eliminate every difficult thought. Instead, it helps us to change our relationship with thoughts and take action based on our values. Case study. Helen believes that if she pauses or loses her words during a presentation, everyone will think she's incapable. In a low-risk team update, she deliberately allows herself to speak from brief notes rather than a fully written script. She pauses once, takes a breath, and continues. Afterwards, nobody criticizes her. One colleague even says the presentation felt natural. The experiment gives Helen evidence that a small imperfection is survivable and often barely noticed. Strategy 6. Add the words, I'm having the thought that. Suppose your mind says, I'm going to fail. Gently rephrase it. I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail. You might then add, I notice that my mind is producing a failure story. Now, this creates psychological distance. The thought has not disappeared, but is no longer being treated as an unquestionable fact. You are the person noticing the thought. You are not the thought itself. Case study. Tom is applying for a promotion and his mind says, I'm going to embarrass myself in the interview. Instead of arguing with the prediction, he says, I'm having the thought that I will embarrass myself. And then he adds, I notice my mind is telling me the failure story. The anxiety remains, but the sentence feels less like a fact and more like a mental event. Tom is then able to continue preparing his examples. Strategy 7. Name the mental story. Our minds often repeat familiar themes. Examples include the I'm not good enough story, and everyone will leave me story, that something bad is going to happen story, or I must get everything right story. When the pattern appears, name it. Here is the I must be perfect story again. Try to say this without criticism. You're not mocking yourself. You're just simply recognizing an old mental habit. Naming the story reduces the need to enter into a debate with it. Case study. Whenever Louise receives brief feedback, her mind immediately tells her that she's not good enough. She begins calling this pattern the not good enough story. When it appears after her supervisor suggests a change, Louise says, There, that's the old story again. She still considers whether feedback is useful, but she no longer treats it as proof that she is a failure. Naming the story helps her to recognize a pattern without becoming absorbed in it. 8. Thank your mind. When a frightening prediction appears, try saying, Thank you, mind. I know you're trying to protect me. This may seem initially very strange, but it reduces the struggle. When we angrily demand that our thoughts disappear, the mind often produces more of them forcefully. Acknowledging the protective intention allows us to respond with less fear. You can continue. Thank you for warning me. I will decide whether any action is needed. Case study. James is waiting for medical test results and repeatedly imagines the worst possible outcome. So he says, Thank you, mind. You're trying to prepare me so that I will not be shocked. He then asks whether there is anything useful he needs to do today. As there is not, he returns to cooking dinner. He is not pretending that the uncertainty is pleasant. He's acknowledging his mind's protective intention without it allowing it to control the evening. 9. Make room for uncertainty. Try replacing I must know what will happen with I prefer certainty, but I can make room for not knowing. Notice the physical sensations that accompany uncertainty. Perhaps there is tightness in the chest or tension in the stomach. Breathe gently and allow the sensations to be present without urgently trying to remove them. Acceptance does not mean liking uncertainty. It means allowing it to exist without organising your whole life around escaping it. Case study. Aisha has attended a job interview and wants to know immediately whether she was successful. She notices tightness in her stomach and the urge to check her email every few minutes. She places her hand gently on her stomach, breathes and says, "I would prefer certainty, but I can make room for not knowing tonight." She decides to check her email at 2 planned times instead. The discomfort rises and falls without her need to eliminate it. 10. Choose a values-based action. While my mind is overthinking, what sort of person do I want to be? Just ask yourself that question. Perhaps you value kindness, courage, connection, honesty, learning, creativity, or health. Then choose one small action that reflects that value. Your mind might say, "You cannot go to the event until you feel completely confident." A values-based response might be, "I value friendship, so I will attend for an hour even though the anxiety is present because I want to spend time with my friends." You do not have to wait until the mind is quiet before beginning your life. Compassion-focused therapies. Compassion-focused therapy recognizes that many people who overthink also criticize themselves for overthinking. They experience the original anxiety, then add, "What's wrong with me? I should be stronger. I am ridiculous." Compassion helps us to respond to distress with sensitivity, courage, and a commitment to doing what is helpful. Case study. Ben feels anxious about attending a friend's birthday meal and considers cancelling so that he can stop worrying. He asks, "What kind of friend do I want to be?" Connection and loyalty matter to him, so he decides to attend for the first hour and arrange his own transport home. His anxiety comes with him, but it does not make the decision. Ben acts in the direction of friendship rather than in the direction of fear. 11. Use a compassionate friend test. Ask yourself, what would I say to a good friend who is having this thought? You probably would not say, "You are pathetic. Sort yourself out." You might say, "It makes sense that you feel worried." You do not have to have the worry at the moment because you don't have all the information yet. Let's just start with looking at what you can control. Now, offer yourself that same tone. Compassion is not about making excuses. It is creating the emotional conditions in which clear thinking becomes more possible. Case study. After making a small mistake at work, Rachel tells herself, "I'm useless. I always ruin things." She imagines that a close friend has made the same mistake and asks what she would say. Her answer is, "You are under pressure, you're human, and you can correct it." Rachel offers herself the same response. Apologise briefly and fixes the error. Compassion helps her to take responsibility without turning the mistake into a personal attack. 12. Use a compassionate voice. Slow your speech slightly. Relax your face and shoulders. Use a warm, steady inner tone. This is a difficult moment. My threat system has become activated. I do not need to solve everything immediately. I can take one step at a time. The content matters, but the tone matters too. A compassionate statement delivered in an aggressive inner voice will not feel compassionate. Imagine that you're speaking to a frightened part of yourself rather than arguing with an enemy. Case study. Michael wakes at 3 a.m. replaying a difficult conversation. His usual inner voice says, "This is ridiculous. Stop thinking." Instead, he relaxes his shoulders and says slowly, "This is a difficult moment. My threat system is active. I do not have to solve the conversation in the middle of the night." The warmer tone reduces the sense of internal conflict and helps him postpone any decision until morning. 13. Practice soothing rhythm breathing. Find a comfortable breathing rhythm. Allow the breath to be slightly slower and deeper than usual without forcing it. You might breathe in gently for a count of 4 and breathe out for a count of 5 or 6, adjusting this so it feels comfortable. As you breathe, allow your shoulders and jaw to soften. The purpose is not to force anxiety away, it is to send the body into a message of relative safeness. Once the threat system settles slightly, you may be better able to decide whether the situation requires action. Case study. Before a family gathering, Nina notices rapid breathing, a tight chest, and thoughts about everything that could go wrong. She sits with both feet on the floor and breathes in comfortably for 4 and out for 6, without forcing the rhythm. After several minutes, the anxiety has not vanished, but her body feels less alarmed. From this calmer position, she decides on a simple plan. Arrive on time, speak to one supportive relative, and take a short break if needed. 14. Write a compassionate letter. Write a short letter to yourself from the perspective of a wise and compassionate person. Acknowledge what you're worried about, why this worry makes sense in the context of your history, what you may be trying to protect yourself from, what you genuinely need, and what the most helpful next step might be. For example, you're replaying that conversation because being misunderstood has been painful for you before. Your mind is trying to prevent rejection. However, continuing to punish yourself will not protect the relationship. You can clarify the issue if necessary and then allow the other person to respond. DBT strategies. Dialectical behavioral therapy teaches skills in mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. The word dialectical reminds us that two things can be true at once. You can feel anxious and still cope. You can dislike uncertainty, but accept that it exists. Case study. Oliver keeps replaying a conversation in which he believes he sounded insensitive. He writes to himself from the perspective of a wise, caring mentor. You're frightened of being misunderstood because rejection has hurt before. Replaying every sentence will not repair the relationship. You can send one thoughtful clarification and then allow the other person to respond. The letter helps Oliver understand both the history behind his worry and the most helpful next step. 15. Check the facts. Ask, what emotion am I experiencing? What event triggered it? What interpretation am I adding? Does the intensity of the emotion fit the confirmed facts? For example, the fact might be, my manager asked to speak to me tomorrow. The interpretation might be, I'm going to be dismissed. The emotion may be intense fear. Check whether the conclusion is supported by evidence or whether the mind has jumped from an uncertain event to the worst possible outcome. Checking the facts does not invalidate emotion. It helps us to determine whether the emotion fits the situation. Case study. Sophie receives a message from her manager saying, "Can we talk tomorrow?" Her fear rises to 9 out of 10, and she assumes she's about to lose her job. She checks the fact. The message contains no criticism. Her recent appraisal was positive, and managers arrange conversations for many reasons. She concludes that dismissal is still possible, but not supported by the available evidence. Her fear drops enough for her to wait rather than sending several anxious messages. 16. Use the stop skill when overthinking is escalating. Remember, S stands for stop. Do not immediately send the message, resign for the job, or demand reassurance. T. Take a step back, pause and breathe. O. Observe. Notice your thoughts, emotions, body sensations, and urges. P. Proceed mindfully. Ask what action will be effective rather than what action will provide the fastest temporary relief. The stop skill creates a gap between emotional urgency and behaviour. Case study. During an argument, Daniel becomes convinced that his partner is going to leave him, and he feels an urgent need to send a long series of messages. He uses stop. He stops typing, takes a step back from the phone, observes fear in his chest and the urge for reassurance, and then proceeds mindfully. He sends one calm message asking whether they can speak later. The pause prevents a temporary emotional surge from creating a larger relationship problem. 17. Use opposite action when fear is unjustified. Overthinking often creates urges to avoid, cancel, repeatedly check, seek reassurance, apologize unnecessarily, or withdraw. When the fear does not fit the facts, consider doing the healthy opposite. If you want to avoid a manageable social situation, approach it gradually. If you want to send 5 reassuring, seeking messages, send none for a set period. If shame wants to make you hide after a small mistake, remain engaged and correct the mistake calmly. Opposite action teaches the brain that discomfort can be tolerated. Mindfulness strategies. Mindfulness is not about emptying the mind. It involves noticing present moment experience without automatically judging it or becoming entangled in it. Case study. Emma worries that she will have nothing interesting to say at a networking event and wants to stay at home. She checks the facts and recognises that the event is uncomfortable but not dangerous. Her opposite action is to attend for 30 minutes, keep an open posture, and introduce herself to one person. Anxiety is present at first, then gradually settles. By approaching rather than avoiding, Emma teaches her brain that she can cope with social discomfort. 18. Use the 5 senses grounding exercise. When you notice you are trapped in your head, reconnect with your immediate environment. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Do this slowly. Overthinking pulls attention into an imagined past or future. Grounding brings attention back to what is actually happening now. Case study. George is lying in bed, mentally rehearsing tomorrow's workload. He noticed that his attention is entirely inside an imagined future. He slowly names 5 things he can see, 4 sensations he can feel, 3 sounds, 2 smells, and 1 taste. By the end, he is aware of the mattress supporting him, the sound of rain, and the cool air in the room. The exercise does not solve tomorrow, but it brings him back to the safety of the present moment. 19. Label thoughts and return. Sit quietly for a few moments and focus on your breathing. When the mind wanders, gently label what is appeared. Planning, worrying, remembering, judging, rehearsing. Then return your attention to the breath or the sounds around you. You may need to return hundreds of times. This is not failure. The return is a practice. Each time you notice that you've been carried away and come back to the present, you are strengthening your ability to disengage from overthinking. IFS informed strategy. Internal family systems, or IFS, views the mind as containing different parts, each of which may be trying to help or protect us. An overthinking part may be attempting to prevent criticism, rejection, danger, or regret. Case study. During a 10-minute mindfulness practice, Maya repeatedly starts planning a difficult conversation. Each time, she quietly labels the activity planning and returns to the feeling of breathing. A few seconds later, she notices rehearsing and returns again. At first, she thinks the repeated wandering means she's doing it badly. She then remembers that noticing and returning is the practice. Over time, Maya becomes quicker at recognizing when overthinking has carried her away. 20. Become curious about the overthinking part. Instead of saying, I hate this part of me, why can't it stop? Try asking, what is this overthinking part afraid what would happen if it stopped? The answer might be, if I stop analysing, I'll make a mistake. If I stop watching people carefully, I'll be rejected. If I relax, something bad will catch me by surprise. You can respond internally. I understand that you're trying to protect me. Thank you for working so hard. I'm an adult now and I can deal with problems as they arise. You do not have to solve every possible danger tonight. The aim is not to get rid of the part. It is to build a more trusting relationship with it so it does not need to work quite so hard. Case study. Peter has a part of him that analyses every financial decision for hours. Instead of criticizing it, he asks, what are you afraid would happen if it stopped? The answer that comes to mind is, we would make a mistake and lose everything, like my parents nearly did. Peter responds to the part, I understand why you work so hard to protect me. I now have savings, information, and the ability to ask good advice. We can review the decision tomorrow, but we do not need to solve it all tonight. Curiosity helps the protected part soften rather than fight harder. A short practice. Let us finish with a brief exercise. You may wish to pause what you're doing now, provided it is safe to do so. Bring to mind one issue that you have been overthinking. Don't choose the most distressing issue in your life. Choose something manageable. Now ask yourself, I notice that my mind is trying to solve this. Ask, is there a practical action I can take? If there is, decide one small step, not 10 steps, just one small step. If there is no action available, say, this is uncertainty. I do not have to resolve it right now. Notice what is happening in your body. Allow your breathing to settle into a comfortable rhythm. Now imagine speaking to the worried part of yourself. I know you're trying to protect me. You do not have to work this out all at once. We can respond if a real problem arises. Finally, ask, what matters to me today beyond this worry? Choose one small values-based action. Perhaps you will telephone someone you care about, go for a walk, complete one useful task, rest, prepare a healthy meal, or return your attention to the life that's happening around the worry. Final thoughts. You may not be able to stop every thought from appearing, and trying to force thoughts out of the mind can make them feel even more important. The goal is not to control every thought. The goal is to notice when thinking has stopped becoming useful, stepping out of the loop and redirecting your attention towards an effective or meaningful action. Remember, a thought is not a fact. Uncertainty is not danger. Discomfort is not the same as inability to cope. You do not need to solve the whole future today. Your overthinking may be a protective habit, but you can thank it without allowing it to take control. So, choose one or two strategies from this episode and practice them repeatedly. Psychological strategies work like physical exercises. Their benefit comes from repetition rather than using them once during a crisis. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe or share it with someone whose mind rarely gives them a moment's peace, and leave a review. It helps people find reliable and accessible mental health information. Until next time, be patient with your mind, be compassionate towards yourself, and remember, you do not have to believe everything you think. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.